Hey Wisecrack, Jared here. As I'm sure you're all aware, Joaquin Phoenix is set to star in a Joker origin movie directed by Todd Phillips later this year. You've heard us consistently wax poetic about the Joker and his nihilistic philosophy in past videos and podcasts, so we're pretty excited about the prospect of a standalone movie, especially one starring an incredible performer like Joaquin. But the more we thought about it, the more we started to question that excitement. Why?
You wanna know how I got these scars?
Heath may be asking that rhetorically, but we're not. Do we really want to know how he got those scars, or the bleached skin and permanent grin? After all, we also thought it would be cool to see Vader's origin story, and we all know how that turned out.
Now this is pod racing.
Oftentimes, the mystique is much more interesting than any answer. But it's not just that making a good origin story is hard. It's that the Joker is the one character that is arguably best without an origin story. And that can be kind of a problem if you're a filmmaker making one. He's supposed to be a case too tough for even the world's greatest detective to solve. It's because we have no insight into the character that he comes across as a chaotic force that defies all comprehension. Any attempt to give him a definitive origin reduces him to something within the realm of reason. It says if we can understand where he came from, we can understand his actions. And the Joker is one of the most compelling villains of all time precisely because we cannot. So, how do you write an origin story for a character like the Joker without pulling the curtain back too far? The most recent comic writers have known all along that we don't actually want to know who the Joker was. Even when they have a unique take on his backstory, they're always careful to present it in such a way as to preserve the mystery. So today we'll be taking a look at a few of the explanations as to why the Clown Prince of Crime has such a mysterious origin, and how that uncertainty is a powerful element of the character's mythos. We'll also respond to some of the rumors about the film and hypothesize as to which comic interpretation just might give Joaquin's Joker the depth needed to right this terrible wrong.
By the way, I've got some grape soda on ice and a bearskin rub waiting.
Welcome to this Wisecrack edition on the secret origins of the Joker, and spoilers ahead for some of the comics. Let's start with comics legend Alan Moore, since he started the whole notion of the Joker having more than one possible origin story. In his graphic novel The Killing Joke, we get an account of the Joker as a failed comedian who was crossed by the mob. Later, the Joker admits to not knowing whether or not that story is true. Sometimes he remembers it one way, sometimes another, and either way, if he were going to have a past, he'd prefer it to be multiple choice. Here, the Joker has a multiple choice past because he himself has multiple mutually incompatible memories as to what happened, which are the result of his shattered psyche. It's all about exploring the contours separating sanity from insanity. The Joker thinks he must have had one bad day that drove him mad, and he thinks as a result that the only thing separating Commissioner Gordon from the inmates at Arkham is one such day. So the Joker engineers a day which sees Gordon chained to a carnival ride out of Willy Wonka's worst nightmares. But instead of images from a bad acid trip, he's shown pictures of his daughter Barbara, her naked body broken, bleeding, and brutally raped. The fact that Gordon doesn't go mad from all that seems to subtly suggest that it takes more than one bad day to go insane, and calls into question the Joker's own memories. For more, we don't know the Joker's backstory because he's so divorced from reality as to not know it himself. These days, we tend to take for granted that the Joker is insane, but it's Moore who made that such a crucial component to the character. Early interpretations tended to present him as just a run-of-the-mill crook with a clown motif and a penchant for laughing at his own lame jokes. But Moore, by making Joker absolutely divorced from reality, not only got to keep coy as to whether his version of the origin was true, but was also able to make the clown a funhouse mirror image of Batman, whose own one bad day made him equally insane. An adult man who goes around dressed like a bat. Here we see how the lack of a concrete backstory not only illustrates the Joker's insanity, but his nihilistic disposition. I think it's a fair bet that in the new film we'll see a man driven to some form of insanity, but the how could potentially compromise this theme. Many, including ourselves, have interpreted The Killing Joke as two scarred souls dealing with the absurd, or life's utter indifference to everything, in this case, their extreme suffering. However, by vowing to dress as a bat and police the city in response to his parents' death, Batman has constructed meaning out of his one bad day. The Joker, on the other hand, completely embraces the absurd, as even the events that drove him insane are just as arbitrary and meaningless as the rest of life. Now, there's no Batman in the upcoming Joker film, but this idea could be repackaged, showing us the absurdity of life with an absurd, made-up, or ambiguous backstory told by an equally absurd villain. The Joker in The Dark Knight eases off him constantly professing his madness, and instead, he outright denies insanity.
See, I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve.
He gives competing anecdotes for how he got his scars.
So I had a wife. Beautiful. Like you.
My father was a drinker.
But importantly, it's not a reflection of mental illness. He's just lying his ass off. We see him ad-libbing anecdotes with no rhyme or reason and certainly no truth behind them. His goal is not to break people through one bad day, but instead to spread anarchy so that the unfair and unjust nature of the world is brought to the fore.
The world is cruel, and the only morality in a cruel world is chance. Unbiased, unprejudiced, fair.
By having the Joker tell competing lies that don't point to any discernible truth, he comes off not as an actual human being with a backstory, but more as a kind of primal force of chaos that seemingly fell from the sky.
What do we got?
Nothing. No matches on prints, DNA, dental. Clothing is custom, no labels. Nothing in his pockets but knives and lint. No name. No other alias.
And if the Joker's argument is that chaos is humanity's true state, then it's only appropriate for his backstory to have no stable foundation. Again, Joker serves as a dark reflection of The Dark Knight. Bale's Batman offers up the noble lie that Harvey Dent died the hero that Gotham deserved. Contrast that with all the ignoble lies that Ledger's Joker tells just to hear himself talk. This backstory as a vague misinformation campaign seems a little less likely for the Joaquin Phoenix film. In order for that to even work, the bulk of the story would have to be framed as a flashback with the Joker in the future telling the story of his origins in order to achieve some goal. But we could still see a Joker that's allergic to honesty, much like Nolan's. But Nolan's character works well because he's a stand-in for an idea with no tangible history, something that will be difficult to replicate in an origin story. Now, the Joker's lack of backstory doesn't even necessarily have to do anything with his psychology or his philosophy. Max Landis in Adventures of Superman offers an explanation that the Joker is just a blank slate that wears various personas, from buffoonish bank robber to murderous mobster, without any being authentic. Landis is going full meta here, essentially saying that every incarnation of the Joker, from Cesar Romero's mustachioed miscreant to Ledger's war paint wearing terrorist, are all various personas that the same individual is adopting on any given day, each having their own origin. If the Joker's origin is multiple choice, then Landis is circling D all of the above. The Jack Napier personality might remember killing Thomas and Martha Wayne, whereas another might recall being the ringleader of the Red Hood gang. What's interesting is that this is actually a way Landis criticizes our infatuation with the Joker. He uses Superman as a mouthpiece to prove how vacuous the villain is, and does the one thing no one ever does to the Joker: laughs at him. You're nothing. You're a goofy idea that only a child would think is cool. The only certain thing about you is the uncertainties. Any writer could write you, any actor play you. All they need to do is make up their own version and people will applaud, but no one will actually ever applaud you. Now, I don't think a Joker movie will go right out and on the character it's covering, but we have seen how comic book movies can subvert their former legacy and how that can make the best version of them in years. So with all this substance coming from the fact that there's no origin story, it's not looking too good for a movie that's entirely about his origins. Now, unless of course it's some kind of formless art film with multiple competing vignettes. We doubt that's going to be the case, but the one thing that really piqued our interest is the current rumor that the film is going to use the Joker to try to tackle topics related to the current political climate. Now, why does this make us hopeful? Because there's a take on the Joker's origins in a recent run that Phillips might draw from to give us the mysterious philosophical Joker we all want: Scott Snyder's. Scott Snyder is one of the biggest newcomers to comics in recent years. When DC relaunched all their titles a few years back, Snyder was entrusted as the lead writer of Batman, and his run quickly became a favorite for many fans. Snyder's Joker says that instead of multiple choice, he prefers the truth of who he was to be more of a choose-your-own adventure. While he takes elements from Moore and Nolan, it's to very different effect. Whereas the former is insane and the latter a liar, Snyder's Joker has weaponized disinformation about his origin story to manipulate Batman and even some fellow Arkham inmates. In this run, Batman sees Gotham as his city, because in an earlier run he had traveled back in time to partake in key moments of Gotham's history. It's complicated. But the Joker decides to directly attack this foundational narrative that the Caped Crusader tells himself. From the first issue of Snyder's run, it suggested that Batman's biggest fear is not knowing the city as intimately as he thinks. As such, the lie that the Joker tailors for Batman is that Gotham is, and always has been, the Joker's city. Alfred's daughter and Gordon find images of the Joker in photographs taken of nearly every major disaster in the city's history, and even an old painting of a pale man already standing on the shore as the ships from Europe first arrive in Gotham's harbor. And the villain Crazy Quilt finds a healing serum in the Joker's spine similar to that of other immortals such as Vandal Savage, Ra's al Ghul, or Keanu Reeves. More importantly, it has all the hallmarks of the kind of story Batman already believes himself to be in. An ancient struggle for the soul of the city, fought between himself and the eternal criminal element. That his greatest foe in the present period should also have so prominent a place in the story's past confirms Bruce's biases. The Joker does something similar at Arkham Asylum. While working under an alias, he becomes familiar with the delusions of the inmates in order to construct a version of his origin that reinforces those delusions. The Joker convinced a Satanist that he was the devil himself. With another inmate who'd flayed her family to prove they'd been replaced by androids, the Joker convinced he was a robot. Another prisoner thought he'd been training to become a secret military Batman, so the Joker convinced him that he had been the first military Batman before going AWOL. He even pulls the same stunt with the leading psychiatrist Dr. Zahir, who's written a book that reveals the true origin of the Joker. But being a psychiatrist, she had her own biases, assuming that the Joker must have been an abused child that suffered psychiatric problems as a result. She even thought she found a trail of documents proving as much, so when the escapees capture her and offer contradictory accounts, she dismisses any evidence that doesn't conform with what she thinks she knows. In the end, it turns out that the co-worker at Arkham who helped her research the Joker's origin, yep, that was the Joker all along. I did my best to help come up with the story you wanted, the one you needed, the grim and grimy tale of woe, the one a publisher would lay down 6 figures for. What all this is getting at is confirmation bias. The psychiatrist ignores the other escapees because she already has an idea of the Joker she'd like to believe. Snyder's Joker weaponizes this confirmation bias, or the tendency to give more credence to evidence that supports one's position and to discount contrary evidence. By echoing the beliefs of his targets, Joker creates an echo chamber, a situation in which a group of individuals isolate themselves from the surrounding society so that their shared beliefs reverberate and are amplified, all while becoming closed off from competing views. So, if Phillips is looking to make a political statement with his Joker movie, perhaps he'll crib from Snyder's run, with the Joker's indiscernible past used as a weapon to conduct a calculated disinformation campaign. And in a world full of echo chambers and fake news, well, you see where this can go. The endgame arc from Snyder's run that we're primarily pulling from was written long before Russia's Internet Research Agency and everything that's happening today, so there's definitely no intentional subtext on Snyder's part. But Phillips may appropriate Snyder's approach to the Joker's various origin accounts if he wants to be relevant to the political moment and not play with fire by trying to tell a definitive story of where he came from. Really, it all comes down to how Phillips frames the film. The Harlequin of Hate is one of our favorite villains at Wisecrack. We want to be excited for the first film he's headlining, but Phillips is crazed as the clown himself if he thinks he can create a definitive origin. Or maybe it's just crazy enough to work. Maybe Phillips totally throws everything we think is so cool about the Joker out the window and manages to make a great movie all the same. Obviously, we want the film to be fantastic, and frankly, DC needs more wins. But what do you think? Will Phillips continue in the tradition of oblique origins to preserve this philosophically compelling character? Or will he ruin all of our childhoods? Let us know what you think in the comments, and if you want to build your own website for free, check out wix.com/wisecrack. Peace, guys.